Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about harnesses and how to properly fit a harness and things to look out for so it doesn't affect the normal biomechanics of your dog. So I'm Adam, this is Bo, let's jump in. So the number one thing you should be looking out for in any harness is the ability to adjust it. And there should be multiple points of adjustment, not just one, and it should be independent on either side. So for example, this harness has 4 different points of adjustments. The left, the right, the back, the front. It's great, I love it, but every harness is different. Make sure that there's multiple points for adjustment because every breed is different and there's varieties within certain breeds depending on size, depth of their chest, broadness of their chest, and all that matters when you're fitting a dog. Now the other reason why the adjustments are so important is depending on the activity that you're doing with your dog, the amount of tightness you have in the harness is going to be different. So for example, if the dog is doing higher intensity activity, like going for a run with you, if you're a runner and you like taking your dog for a run, then you're going to want more range of motion in the harness. You're going to want more flexibility, so it's going to be a little bit looser. And the reason why is when the dog is panting and breathing heavily, you want room for chest expansion. Those those accessory breathing muscles are working hard when the dog is panting, and as a result, you want to make sure that it's not too tight around the chest and the ribs to allow for that normal accommodation in that section. Now, I would highly advise that you don't let your dog run off leash with a harness. I've seen dogs get hung up on down branches and down trees, and it can really impact the way a dog functions and cause pretty acute injuries. Now, if you're just walking with your dog on leash, then you don't typically have to worry about having it too loose. You actually want to have it a little bit tighter, especially if your dog's a puller. You don't have to worry about heavy breathing. However, if they are an older dog or they have a darker coat like Bo and it's a really hot day, like we get here with the humidity, and they're panting heavily, you want to have a lot more flexibility in this section so they can breathe a little bit more freely. Now, another thing that's really important is to check how the straps are oriented on your dog. So a big thing that I see on a lot of dogs, and it's more specifically on smaller dogs lately, is the front straps where they're crossing the shoulder joint. So the really important joint called the glenohumeral joint, which if you get your dog to shake a paw, both cooperates here. Oh, shake a paw, good. Is this joint right here in the front, and you don't want to have a strap that goes across the glenohumeral joint. If a dog is a puller especially, it's going to be compressing that joint, and it's going to cause changes in the normal range of motion in that joint, and that can lead to joint issues down the line. Another important thing when you're checking that same strap is seeing how it relates to the dog's armpit. You definitely don't want a strap that is too tight in the dog's armpit because that will cause chafing, and you'll notice your dog is throwing their arm outwards to try to avoid that chafing. That can cause issues in the shoulder, let alone the neck and the elbow, so just make sure that it's not chafing. In a dog like Bo here, I can easily fit 2 finger widths between the edge and the seam of the harness to the bottom of his armpit. So we want to make sure that there's room and it's not going to affect their normal range of motion. So always double check that after a couple uses of the harness to make sure there's not chafing happening through that area. Now finally, the last thing that we want to touch on is just the different styles that you can have in harnesses in terms of attachment, whether it's a back attachment or a chest attachment like this. So if it's a back attachment and they're a puller, you want to make sure that the harness is not going to ride up into the lower part of their neck. A lot of the force of the harness is going to go into that lower neck and into the chest strap here, and that goes along the front of the sternum. So make sure if they are a puller that one, it's fitted right in the lower neck and it's not riding up. And then the other thing too is make sure there's enough surface area on the harness that it's going to distribute that force evenly so it's not putting isolated pressure into one area. The other way you can attach is to the front, and typically we do this if a dog is a puller. So when you have this attachment and your dog's a puller, you want to make sure that it's fairly snug because it's so much easier for this harness to rotate and cause a lot of irritation. Now, if I'm on this side of Bo and it's pulling, because he is a puller, he likes rabbits and he likes squirrels and coyotes actually is one of his favorite things to go after. But he will pull to the opposite direction. And what will happen if this rides up, it will put all of the isolated pressure into the lower neck. And those facet joints, which are little joints in the vertebrae, can get highly irritated when this is the case. So if you ever notice that your dog is dropping their head a little bit more through the day, they're not looking up as easily at you, it could be related to that. So double check the fit of the harness and make sure it's snug enough so it's not sliding around. I hope this helps. It's going to definitely help when you go and get that next harness. It's one of the most important things to make sure the fit is correct, because depending on your use case and depending on your dog, it's going to be different from one person to the next.